have that out of the way, for anyone who's new this week, my name is Ella Sobani. I'm 17 and I'm from San Diego, California, and I am head of Project Aquascope. And now my team is going to quickly introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Vivian. I'm 17. I'm also from San Diego.
Hi, I'm Richard. I'm 16 and I'm also from San Diego.
Hey, I'm Kaylee. I'm 16 and I'm from San Diego.
Hi, I'm Lily. I'm 17 and I'm from San Diego.
Hi, I'm Akash. I'm 16 and just like everyone else, I'm from San Diego.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, you guys. So for week 3, we are focused on environmental sustainability in government and the private sector. So we have some really wonderful speakers here today that I'm really excited to hear from, Lauran Madden and Samantha Wynns. And before we get started, I'm just going to quickly reintroduce Project Aquascope's mission for, again, anyone new this week. So at Project Aquascope, we are dedicated to providing greater accessibility to STEM education and to inspire a spirit of environmental sustainability among youth, empowering them to be change makers in their own community. So now Richard is going to quickly go over the schedule for today.
So currently we're doing our welcome, and right now Lauran Madden from Blue Nalu is going to present from 9:45 to 10:15. And just remember that we're going to have a quick Q&A session at the end of that. And then from 11:20 to 11:50, Samantha Wynns from the Cabrillo National Monument will present. And then finally at 11:55 to 11, we'll have a group photo. So if anyone who feels comfortable turning on their camera can turn it on, and then we'll take a photo and we'll say thank you. And that will be the week 3 of our event. And now Akash will introduce our first speaker, Lauran Madden.
Right. Lauran Madden is Director of Research and Development and Product Development at Blue Nalu. She has a Bachelor of Science in Chemical Engineering from Cornell University and a PhD in Bioengineering from the University of Washington. She has significant multidisciplinary experiences in the design and development of novel biomaterials, cell expansion methods, and 3D tissue fabrication to generate 3D cell-based products. She has been working at Blue Nalu to create new technology to protect the environment and provide consumers with safe seafood. Lauran, you can share your screen to present.
Thank you for the introduction. Let me get my screen up. Okay, can you guys see that slide? Great. Well, thank you for inviting me to speak with you. It's really great to see young students interested in, the STEM field, as well as particularly with things that would impact the ocean health. At Blue Nalu, we're very focused on, all things blue tech and associated with ocean health as well as human health. And me personally, I've been with the company since the very beginning. So almost 2.5 years ago, we started operations here in San Diego. We were just in a small starter lab, and now we have a new site in Sorrento Valley, and then we recently purchased another site to expand our operations, which I'll talk about near the end. And we're really supportive of and committed to the sustainability and promoting ocean health and wellness. Okay, I think this is, okay, got my thing working now. So the Blue Nalu mission, we are to be the leader in cellular aquaculture. And basically providing consumers with great tasting seafood products that are healthy for the people, humane for sea life, and sustainable for our planet. And so how we approach this problem is by making seafood products directly from fish cells. And we believe that these will be able to be more trusted, safer products, potentially free of mercury and various environmental contaminants, which are serious issues right now. So this is just a few of the challenges that current seafood products face. So one of them is, seafood quality. Depending on the time of year or where the material is harvested, it may be harvested in, off the coast of Asia or South America, and then being shipped thousands of miles to, your local supermarkets in San Diego or across the US. And depending on how that's shipped, it can cause serious quality issues once it goes through importation and then eventually arrives at the consumer's plate. One of the other big issues is just the pricing and supply. So as many people know, fish are seasonal. So, at certain times of the year, you might have one species, then 6 months later, you're not able to obtain that species. So when you go to a restaurant, the only thing on the menu that doesn't have a price and is market price is the seafood products. And that has to do with a lot of this instability in supply and pricing. And as we move towards, a larger overall global population, we just need more food to supply everyone. And the seafood supply is one of the most vulnerable because it's in the oceans, it's subject to, natural disasters, hurricanes, ocean warming, ocean acidity, as well as overfishing, and there's numerous other issues. And so to create more food stability in the seafood supply, we feel that this Blue Nalu can have another, option and another supply option for consumers. The next one is really about the various skilled labor and risks. The seafood industry does have, some negative labor practices and slavery practices associated with it that we would hope to solve by providing more manufacturing type jobs with higher pay and more stability. And also, when you look at the product, to get the fillet off of fish, it takes a very skilled individual to do this. And so presumably Blue Nalu products could be 100% yield, come pre-portioned and be very easy to use by restaurants or consumers. And the last two are more about, human health and ocean health, where seafood is one of the, few products where mercury and other levels actually exceed that of many other products. So the legal limit of mercury in fish is 1 ppm, but for other products, it's 10-fold less than that. So, and also there's, histamines, other contamination, and it can frequently cause food poisoning or other human health issues. We feel that Blue Nalu products, because of the way they're manufactured, could basically eliminate a lot of these issues. And then lastly, which I know this group is concerned with, is overall seafood sustainability. And by providing a product that's not subject to fishing or other, for example, trawling or things that negatively impact the biodiversity of the oceans, we may be able to make a more sustainable product, have less shipping and a less overall footprint. So I'm going to go into a little bit more detail into a couple of these and just show you a few examples of data. But in general, the supply chain for seafood is very limited, and that's just due to the natural resources. So seafood consumption is rising globally, and we're at an all-time high, and we expect it to keep rising. At the same time, more fish are being overfished, and a lot of the populations are drastically reduced. And you can see this graph on the right. Over time, we've basically decimated the overall seafood stock that's in the ocean. And so this just cannot continue. The supply that's naturally occurring will not be able to continue to supply consumer demand. So there really needs to be another option, and we believe Blue Nalu can provide that other option. Secondly, with human health, a lot of consumers are much more concerned with, what are we eating? One of the known risks for various seafood products is mercury, and the FDA has even put out, this list of various choices, which are things to avoid, good choices, or best choices. At Blue Nalu, we can imagine that because our products do not have mercury from the environment, that perhaps there's a eat everyday choice of Blue Nalu fish, and that even, an oxymoron would be a mercury-free tuna that you could even eat every day. And so these are just benefits that we may be able to provide to consumers for increased human health. Secondly, one of the, ongoing issues right now is the plastics and microplastics contamination in the feed, as well as PCBs Fraud is a big issue with several species, including red snapper and even tuna that we're working on. And there are a host of other pathogens and contaminants that come with seafood products that, of course, the government tries to regulate, but that are risks. And unless we really decrease the pollution in the ocean, this is going to be an ongoing issue for consumers. So lastly is just overall sustainability goals. And Blue Nalu is really proud that we meet 10 of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, including the zero hunger, life below water, climate action, work and economic growth. And we really want to create, as it says, healthy oceans and happy people. We believe that our solution can coexist with existing solutions, but also help to reduce stress on the oceans in general. So just a few things about, the biodiversity. Maintaining the biodiversity of the ocean really helps with maintaining all those species, having kind of a sink in helping with the carbon offsets, and also it helps with the food security. And as you can see, one of the comments is that the oceans are a primary regulator of the global climate. And this is just because it covers so much of the Earth's surface, and there is a lot of life below water, and we definitely want to recognize and celebrate that at Blue Nalu. So how does the solution kind of actually work? I'll kind of get a little bit deeper in the science, but this is just a little graphic. I called it the beginner's guide. So first we just start off with high quality sourcing of the cell material. So as I said, the cells come directly from the species of interest. So this could be a mahi, it could be a tuna. We then use methods that we developed to isolate and expand the cells in vitro. We feed them things like sugars, fats, vitamins, amino acids, all the things that you or the fish would typically intake to grow normally. Then we grow them up into large bioreactors, which are similar to what you would see in maybe like a brewery or like a yogurt factory. And then we combine the cells back together and have them function as, the fat or the muscle that you would typically eat in a fish fillet. And then once they're turned back into the fillet, they're basically ready to be used as a product. And this could be, raw, like a sushi product or a poke, or cooked in a taco. So a little bit more detail on that. And if anyone has questions, feel free. I know I don't want to get too technical, but I definitely want to give you a taste of the science. So the first step when we isolate those cells, Blue Nalu uses precursor cells, so such as satellite cells or pre-adipocytes. And these are cells that actually reside in the muscle or fat tissue, and they are naturally predestined to become muscle or fat. So you can see on the right here, these little guys are muscle precursor cells that we've grown in the dish, and then we can expand them for many generations. Once the cell lines are stabilized, we can then scale up into large bioreactors and make pounds and pounds of these cells. One thing to note is that Blue Nalu does not use any genetic engineering, so we anticipate a non-GMO status. And we also do not use any antibiotics or animal-derived components. And this is for both the human health as well as the sustainability. So we want all the components going into our manufacturing to also be sustainable and to promote the of the product. So lastly, once we have all the cells, we do product development, and this is really to generate seafood products that have similar sensory attributes to what you would expect. So if it's a tuna, maybe it's soft, a little bit metallic, or if it's a white fish, it might be a lighter texture profile. And you can see an example on the right of some products we've made. So this is like a poke, we did a fish taco, a kimchi, and so you can use it in a variety of ways similar to that you would use any other fish product on the market. And we also do comparisons to make sure that the nutritional profile matches that of existing seafood products. So one thing that people love about seafood is the healthiness of it. There's omega-3s, low saturated fat, high protein content, and Blue Nalu wants to make those same healthy products for consumers. So diving in a little bit deeper on how do we get the cells, where do they come from, how do you know they work? So one of the things we start with, so these are actually data from our mahi cell lines that we generated. So we start with a mahi, not this one, but ones that actually came from a university setting and we knew were grown in a clean environment with sterilized water. We isolate the muscle tissue. So muscle is made of muscle fibers, which are these big pink guys. And then on the edges of them are what's called the satellite cells. So they're these tiny cells and they just live on right next to it. So when the animal is growing, or humans, when they exercise or get injured, those cells are activated and proliferate and can make new muscle or work to make larger muscles. Similar to if you're working out and building up your quads or your biceps to build more muscle. So again, we isolate those, expand them, and then what we do is look for how long can they grow. So one of the limitations with standard cells is to only go to about 50 doublings. So this would be like 2 to the 50th cells from a single cell. And basically we qualify all of ours to go past that and even beyond 100 or 200 doublings. And we also look to make sure they're stable. So in the initial period, there might be some variability as some cells die off, but then eventually they stabilize over time. And then of course we confirm function. So here we're showing that these cells, even after many, many passages, are capable of fusing into muscle fibers, and you can see them expressing sarcomeric alpha-actinin, which is a muscle-specific protein that's associated with the contractile apparatus. So these are all the tests that we do to validate and really make sure the cells that we're using in our process are the same that you would get if you took a fillet from the original fish. And one thing just to note is that this process works with a number of different species. So one thing that separates Blue Nalu from a lot of other companies is that we made a platform technology because we know that there's such biodiversity in the oceans that we don't want to be a solution for just one species. We know that there are many species at risk who need that solution. So we've already worked with a variety of freshwater and saltwater fishes, and in the future we'll look to expand to various crustaceans or mollusks. And we also do prioritize species that have current issues, whether that's a sustainability issue, health risks, fraud, or food security issues. So here's just an example of 3 species we've already have cells for, such as mahi, the bluefin tuna, which I think everyone is familiar with, and then also red snapper. Red snapper actually was big a while ago, but then due to overfishing isn't used anymore and is actually at risk. So we definitely are really excited about these 2, bringing a sustainable option for consumers for those seafood products. Okay, I guess I'll talk a little bit about some of the fun things that we've done in the past year or so. So this is already becoming a reality. Last December, we had our first demonstration event. And one of the key things with this event was we were actually able to showcase that this product could be served in multiple ways. So this included a raw product, an acidified product, and a cooked product. A lot of previous companies in the field were only able to show raw product before and that it couldn't handle cooking, but we were actually able to, I think I showed before, the little fried pieces of taco. So this was with yellowtail, cereal lolandi. So many of you may be familiar with yellowtail from sushi, and we were also able to show it in multiple other applications. So here's just a few pictures of various dishes from that event. And I think one other thing to note is that Blue Nalu focuses on what we call whole muscle seafood products. So in these products, we use a very, very high concentration of cells to basically be representative of what you would get in a fillet from standard fish. And in contrast, many other, for example, even the burger products or dumpling products are all mixed. So in which case you mix the cells with a plant or other things and dilute out the cells. We really are focusing on these products that can be used in many applications. So here's just a few examples of applications that Blue Nalu has done. On the left is a fish taco. We have a kimchi, which was acidified, and we have some kind of raw in a soup, and then we also have a poke form. And so one of the reasons we want such a versatile product is to really enhance the uptake. I think seafood is one of those categories where it really is a global opportunity. And Blue Nalu actually works with companies around the globe to understand what is the product needs and where do we want to go. So I think I mentioned earlier, Asia has a very, very high seafood consumption, but the products eaten in Asia are very different from the products eaten in the US. Where we have a fish taco there, they may have a rice ball or sushi or some other type of dish. And so we want to make sure that our products would perform in any of these applications. And Blue Nalu has also, in the press, cited that we're working with major players such as Holmone, Griffith Foods, Sumitomo, and Rich Products in the area. And we have support already from, major players in the seafood industry who are very excited about this and really keen to work with companies like ours to bring these next generations of solutions to the market. So it's definitely really exciting to see that it's not just the individual companies, but there are already people in the seafood space who are eager for this next generation of products. So I guess one of the biggest questions we get is, when can we buy these products? And so I kind of just wanted to go in a little bit and explain, why does it take so long to go from maybe 2 years ago when we were first conceptualizing this to it being available in a restaurant or a supermarket. And for those of you who are familiar with Impossible, they were kind of on a similar time scale where you have several years of R&D operations. Eventually you'll have some point where you get into maybe 1 or 2 restaurants, and then even a few years later, you actually have large manufacturing facilities. So it is really a long-term play, and we hope to grow by regional and global expansion over time. So when we first started in 2018, we were just doing basic cell biology research. As I said, we were in kind of a small lab. We actually started with only, 6 of us, 6 or 7 people that first year, where we did basic cell biology research. And we're able to come up with this platform technology to generate various cell lines for different species. So once that's accomplished and you have the basic science and the cell lines established, then you can start to do some process development. So we have a process development team made of engineers who try to make the process more efficient and get it into bioreactors, which are actually scalable. So if you look at a standard tissue culture dish in 2D, those are not scalable. And I think the first cell-based burger done in Europe by Mark Post, if you see pictures of how that was made, there's a lot of plastic used to make that burger. And so to make something, you want it to be scalable, you want to decrease the amount of waste, and using this type of reactor is one way to do that. So once you have your basic process, you basically have to scale up into larger and larger facilities. The site that we just bought is to achieve this phase 3 2,000 liter, which we anticipate will make enough product to test locally or to send to a few restaurants sometime next year. However, to do this, one of the things you need to do is work with the regulators. So we're working with the FDA. We're going to Washington, D.C. and talking with people and making sure to set the groundwork so that the government knows our products are safe and our products are also bringing benefits to the economy, whether that's through sustainability, providing new jobs. I don't think I mentioned at the beginning, but U.S. imports almost 94% of our seafood, according to the FDA. And so people are really excited that, hey, this could drive a U.S. seafood economy and kind of bring back a lot of what's been lost by overfishing. And so that would really benefit a lot of local economies, including here in San Diego. So once we establish this market test activity, we anticipate continuing to grow. And then I don't know how many of you are familiar with food facilities, but when you're talking about food, it's at a very, very large scale. So you're making millions of pounds a year. And one can imagine, if you have billions of people on the planet, each person's eating, a pound of food a day, that's a lot of food. And so that's why the sizes here are so large. And we definitely anticipate, if you can make a factory, for example, if we have a factory in San Diego or LA, we could be making seafood products that only have to travel a couple hundred miles versus what they're currently traveling now is thousands of miles from catch to destination. So we can really cut down on the transport and kind of encourage the local economy using this platform. This is kind of just a little picture that we had published before, just showing how similar it is to other existing food facilities. So we describe it as kind of brewery meets food packaging facility. So like I talked about, were some of the bioreactors that could be used. And so on the right-hand side of this, you see these large tanks. So that's where the cells would grow. You have the cell culture media, which is the nutrients, the sugars, amino acids, and they would be in here. And then as you go through, basically the sizes get bigger. So in bioreactors, you use a seed train, so you'll start in a small one, grow up to a really big one. And then once you have enough cells, you can start collecting them and making the product. And then once you have a product, you can treat it like you would any other seafood product. So maybe in line 1, I have some, raw fish that's going, just getting frozen, getting shipped. Maybe in line 2, I can grill market and have some, lemon sauce grilled fish here. And then maybe in line 3, you're doing a breaded batter, and that's going to be used as a fish taco at some other restaurant. So it's an example of the versatility, and that even though the beginning stages look a little bit different, all the steps are very similar to what you would see in a typical food factory. And I think the last couple of minutes, just I know Ella and Vivian wanted me to maybe think about, how can you all continue to be involved. Obviously, you already are just being involved with the Aquascope, and that's really great to see. And then I think for me, just part of my personal journey, I am very heavy on education and staying educated in anything you're interested in. I actually started my science career working with cells when I was 17, and I worked at a lab at UPenn for the summer, and then that really drove my interest for the rest of my career in this kind of cell and biotechnology field. And also, I've been continuing, as I grow older, there's a lot of organizations that, for me in engineering, it was, Society of Women Engineers, there's Women in Science, and a lot of the other professional organizations. As you move on to college or as you continue on, you can stay and network and continue to be engaged kind of in the community at large. And just 2 other things, Blue Nalu is very dedicated to, ocean health and ocean education. So we have on our website, which I just put a little snapshot there, about the Rethink Seafood, we do have some resources on our website. And then we also have kind of a sister website called Eat Blue. And that's Blue. But that website is more of a nonprofit arm, which is dedicated to promoting ocean health, ocean awareness, and kind of the positive impacts that different people are making on the ocean. So that's also a great resource. If you want to go read, we have various ambassadors that are, experts in these different fields who post different articles. And we also pull news articles related to ocean health and sustainability from the news at large. And then, of course, I encourage all of you to, keep staying involved. Sometimes it's silly, but you focus on the things you can do. So, reducing your own footprint, making conscious decisions, being mindful about your activities, and then, of course, telling your friends. I think one of the biggest ways to get other people on board is to show that you're enjoying it and you're having fun and making a positive impact. And of course, I think all of you, if you get educated and stay in the STEM fields, you could be the next solution that we see 10 or 20 years from now. And to me, that's really exciting to see people being involved early, and hopefully 10 years from now, you'll be, doing interviews and being in the papers with whatever the next big solution is. So that's what I have for today. So thank you. And I think if we have any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Thank you so much, Lauran. That was I'm so excited now. If anyone has any questions, please drop them in the chat or, on mic. If not, I have quite a few questions for you. So I'll just wait a couple of minutes to see if anyone has any questions.
I will stop sharing so I can see people.
So okay, so from Serena, this is awesome. I'm wondering what sort of backlash have you encountered while trying to gain support, and how have you dealt with it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say there's two main kinds of backlash. So one is basically that it's new. So, and I think people saw this when Impossible or other plant-based products come out. Even when I told my parents that I was going to work at this company, their first reaction was, what? What is this? What are you doing? And I really had to explain it to them. And then I think once we had the first products coming out and we could show them, hey, this is fish. Like, you can eat it. You can treat it like poke. You can cook it like a taco. It resonates a lot more, and they become more comfortable with it. So I think that's one, is just overcoming preconceived notions, putting more images out there about, what the product looks like, what does it taste like, what are the benefits for different people. And then the second one is more political in nature. So I don't know how much you're aware of the industry, but with a lot of the plant products, there's been backlash from, for example, the meat associations on labeling, what can you call the product, and a lot of it has to do with money at the end of the day. They don't want other products coming in and taking market share. And so that's one thing, and why we've reached out a lot to work with the current seafood industry. And like I said, we already have investors and collaborators who are in the seafood business to try to make sure that they understand, we're a third solution. We can still be part of this, and we're not going to negatively impact your business. And I think that makes it a lot easier for them to accept and not try to kind of put a block up for our products to get to market.
Awesome, yeah. So another question we have for you is, well, thanks for the presentation. What kind of advice can you give to someone who is starting up in the field of aquaculture?
So do you mean in aquaculture or like cell-based foods? They're a little bit different. But I guess either one. The first thing, if you want to be in this field, I think choosing the right educational path. So, and luckily in San Diego, there's a lot of ocean-based. So if you look at Scripps, UCSD, there's great educational programs, both on the cell side as well as on the whole animal side. And so I think doing that, there's also a lot of opportunity through, the aquariums. We also have NOAA or other things where you can get involved, perhaps do an internship and see if you like the field. I definitely encourage, I've always had, whether it's an internship, a summer job, a side job on top of classes. And I think just getting that, actual work experience really helps you understand what is it you're passionate about, what area do you want to be in, and also prepares you to eventually have a career in that industry.
Awesome. Our next question is one I actually have as well. Do you think this solution of like cell-based, lab created products, I guess, can be applicable to other sectors of the food industry? Like you were talking about the burger that was created in Europe and everything, and how it had a lot of plastic in it. Do you ever kind of see like red meat or even chicken like moving in the same direction as seafood is?
Yeah, for sure. So there's a number of, so everyone who's in the industry is still technically a startup. Nobody yet has products on the market, and that's because they're going to require regulatory approval before doing that. And there's, so in the US, there's ones such as Memphis Meats or Just that are doing a variety of, poultry or beef products. And there's a couple other seafoods. So one is doing salmon. In Asia, there's Shayak that's trying to do shrimp. And then there's a few other ones in Europe. So some are trying to do pork or just fat in general. And so I think there's definitely a lot of applications. Even in the dairy industry, people are using, yeast or other cells to create the proteins without having an animal. So there's definitely a lot of research in the area, and I think we're just going to continue to see more and more products hitting the shelves over the next decade.
Cool. Yeah, I'm excited for that. My next question, or let me check the chat. But my next question is, what is the like? How long does it take from start to finish in the manufacturing? I guess centers for like.
Yeah, so the longest phase is really the development phase when we're establishing the cell line. Once we have the cell lines, we actually freeze them, which is we call it cryopreservation, and then we never have to go back to the animal. So once we have them frozen, you essentially start up the bioreactor. It may take 1 to 4 weeks to get it up to being ready to harvest, and then you can just continuously harvest. And you may be making product every day continuously for 1 to 3 months. So it doesn't take that long, particularly when compared to other food items too, such as yogurt or things that have a similar kind of wait time somewhere in there before you're ready to harvest.
Okay. So our next question is, how far is Blue Nalu into its R&D stages? How long do you estimate it will take to break even?
Two very different questions. So in R&D, as I said, we have cell lines from a wide variety of species. We already have the small bioreactors, and we're in the process of building out the test market facility that would actually be making product for sale, though at a smaller scale, so maybe just a few restaurants. Breaking even is a much different situation. I can't estimate or actually tell you right now our projections, but we don't expect, I think I showed you that graph, even in the next 5 years to have that really large scale facility up and running. And to be profitable, typically you need to be at a certain scale to get basically the economies of scale where we can make product at a price where the average consumer can buy it, but also that the company would be generating, be at profitability and generating enough revenue. So it's definitely a few years out for that.
Okay, got it. Let's see, anything else in the chat? Okay. I guess kind of one question I have is, Well, first of all, please keep us updated when you're able to get in restaurants like in the San Diego area. I would love to go and try it. All the pictures, I think I mentioned in the chat as well, all the pictures look so authentic and, you know, like tasty. Someone asked, I don't quite understand the question, but are all the fish in the sea edible? And how have you guys been able to identify the thicknesses of the fish? So.
Well, I would say no, not all the fish in the sea are edible. Some of them actually produce toxins, so I wouldn't eat any fish you catch. But in general, the contaminants of fish are well known. So the seafood products sold in the US are actually under what's called seafood HACCP. And there's a very, very long document describing all of the hazards associated with various seafood products. So that's, you know, what pathogens might come with them. Are they, you know, could they have histamine? And that sort of thing. So it's actually a very studied industry, and the FDA has a lot of guidance documents to basically tell producers what to watch out for.
Awesome. So I think this will be our last question for today. How long is the process from the isolation of the muscle cells in the fish to growing the cells into the edible substance? I think you kind of, yeah.
Yeah, it actually takes, we do year-long longevity studies on all of our cell lines before we validate them and qualify them. So it definitely about 12 to 18 months, depending on the species.
Thank you so much for the insightful presentation, Lauren. We really thought that the cell-based seafood is a really innovative way to increase sustainability. And next, Kaylee will introduce to us our next speaker.
Thank you, Lauren.
Great. Have a great day.
Thank you, Lauren, and thank you, Lily. So now I'll be introducing Samantha Wynns. And biologist Samantha Wynns knew from an early age that she wanted to study and protect beautiful places and the creatures that live in them. She's a conservation biologist that both does science and communicates science. Sam now proudly works with the National Park Service at Cabrillo National Monument, where she wears many hats, gathering data as a field biologist, educating youth and the public as a science educator, and bringing the parks to the people with community outreach. During any given day, she can be found wrangling snakes, gently and respectfully, of course, leading a STEM summer camp for underserved girls, or giving scientific lectures out in the community. In every role, Sam's goal is to illuminate and inspire a passion for STEM and a commitment to environmental stewardship.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for that introduction. Nice to see you. Nice to be here. Thank you for having me. So I'm going to share my screen here and show you a little bit of a PowerPoint. Visual aids are always good, right? So hold on one second. Slideshow. There we go. Can everyone see that? Thumbs up if you can see that. All right, cool. It's working now. All right, well, as you said, my name is Sam Wynns, and I am a conservation biologist and a science educator with the National Park Service right here in town at Cabrillo National Monument. I'm going to get to what that means in a minute, but first I want to talk about how I got here, because that's actually pretty related to what I do. Okay, so it all begins with my backyard, but psych, that's not my backyard. This is just a picture of kind of a typical backyard if you're lucky enough to have a backyard, right? But this isn't what my backyard looked like. This is what my backyard looked like. I grew up outside of Yellowstone National Park in a tiny town called West Yellowstone, Montana, which serves as, you might have guessed, the western gate to Yellowstone National Park. And why is that important? Why are our national parks important? Well, there are about 420 national parks across the United States. And it all comes down to the mission of the National Park Service, right? So the mission of the National Park Service is to preserve and protect our nation's most important historic, cultural, and natural resources. It's basically a conservation organization, right? that preserves our places that are most important to us in this nation, right? So you can imagine growing up outside of Yellowstone, which is one of the national parks, duh. In fact, it was the first national park. It was created in 1872. And this is more of kind of what I grew up with, right? You can imagine growing up surrounded by this incredible wildlife and this beautiful nature, that really sculpted what I wanted to be when I grew up, right? And what the career path I was going to take. So I would see things like this. I would see up here in the upper left-hand corner, this is called an osprey. It's a bird of prey, right? I'd see them dive down into the water to catch fish. And one time I was so close to the water's edge that as it pulled this huge fish up out of the water and flew over my head, droplets fell down on my upturned face, right? I could see a mother grizzly with her little playful cubs. I saw that many times. At night, I would hear the mournful howling of wolves. And when I would look up, I would see the entire Milky Way galaxy, right? So being surrounded and immersed in that, of course, I wanted to grow up and study that and immerse myself in that nature as a career path. However, I started to realize that nature needs help, right? So it happened right around middle school when this event occurred. This is called the Exxon Valdez disaster. Some of you may have heard of it. The Exxon Valdez is a massive oil tanker, right? Exxon oil, that crashed off of the coast of Alaska. And millions of gallons of oil spilled into the ocean and killed a lot of the wildlife there. We're talking fish, we're talking seabirds, we're talking sea otters, right? Everything that lived there got coated in oil and much of them died. And I began to recognize, oh, wow, you know, humans really affect their environment, and maybe not always in good ways. So not only did I want to study nature, not only did I want to immerse myself in it, I realized that it also needed my help. So I wanted to protect it. All right, so just to show you what you're looking at here, this looks like a tiny little toy ship, doesn't it, right? A little tiny toy ship. This is actually as big as an aircraft carrier. This is a massive oil tanker. And if you look spreading out from the ship, you see all the kind of iridescent stuff on the water, that's oil. So think of that, millions of gallons. Think of an aircraft carrier and millions of gallons of oil coming out of it. You can see up at the upper right-hand corner, we have a poor seabird who's coated in oil, right? And then these are people who are just cleaning up the beach from all the oil. Look at them, they're just coated in it as they're trying to clean up the beach. That's how much oil there was, right? So humans, we really affect our environment, and our environment needs help. So mission accomplished, that's what I do, right? So a biologist is a scientist who studies life, right? Bio means life. And a conservation biologist is someone who preserves and protects that life, right? And here I am at Cabrillo National Monument doing just that. And you might wonder, like, how, yeah, you preserve and protect it, but how do you go about doing that? And what are the specifics there? Well, we study almost all of our native species that live at Cabrillo. So we study our native plants, we study our marine or intertidal species, we study all different types of birds. So we look at shorebirds, birds, songbirds, you name it. We study our bats, and we study our reptiles and our amphibians there. And of course, it wouldn't make sense to study them all the same way, right? It wouldn't make sense to study a bird the same way you would study an octopus, right? One flies, one's a marine organism. One has a spine, the other one's an invertebrate, right? So as scientists, you have to devise what's the most clever way to study these different types of species and these different organisms, so you can get information about them. Because of course, I can't protect what I don't know about. So I really need to dig deep and understand the creatures that live there, the plants that live there, and how they interact in their ecosystem, right? But that's not all that I do. You mentioned this at the beginning, right? I actually also spend a great deal of my time communicating science. Because when you think about it, you can actually distill the role of a scientist into three basic tasks, right? So one is to observe a problem in the world around them. Two is to find a solution to that problem using the scientific method, right? And three is to communicate that science. Because if we don't communicate that science, how are we going to actually solve problems, right? So like if I find a cure for cancer, if I don't tell anyone about it, is anyone going to get cured? No, right? So science communication is equally important. So I do things like this, right? So engage the community with science. Up here is Ecologic, which is a free STEM summer camp for girls that I run. And then down here was a Comic-Con panel that I had about using art to communicate science as well, right? Also very important. If you can show people how this nature, if you can really inspire them, right, to care about it, and that's called environmental stewardship. You can foster the next generation of environmental stewards, because people aren't going to protect what they don't know about and what they don't care about, right? So communicating that science and really showing them how amazing that nature is super crucial. And in a way, it's kind of like paying forward my experiences growing up in Yellowstone, being immersed in that nature. Now I get to show others, like, look how cool this is, and you should care about it, right? Okay, so you might be asking yourself right about this time, how can I get involved in national parks, right? Well, good news. There's many different ways you can get involved in national parks and many other areas of public lands, right? So the first and foremost is volunteering, right? So the National Park Service has a really robust volunteer program called Volunteers in Parks. And you can go to volunteer.gov, that's Gov for government, right? Makes sense. And look up national parks or other public lands near you that you might want to volunteer at. Spoiler alert, if you want to volunteer at Cabrillo National Monument, you can kind of bypass that a little bit and email us directly, and we can get that process started. So you can email us at CABR, that's short for Cabrillo, _volunteers@nps.gov, right? You might want to screenshot this or take some notes if this is something you're interested in at this moment. And this volunteering is really a good way to kind of get your feet wet, to really try it out. See if you are interested in the National Park Service, see if you like the work that we do, right, without a big level of commitment. However, if you're looking for something that is a little more structured and maybe has the potential for pay, there's two organizations that you should be aware of, okay? So the first is the Student Conservation Association. And you can see the website right here under intern entry-level position. It's thesca.org. And the second organization is AmeriCorps. You can look nationalservice.gov, right? And both of these offer internships, many of them paid internships. And they even offer these positions for people who are under the age of 18, okay? So there's two different ones that you can find in SCA, for instance, for ages 15 through 19. So I'd recommend going to check that out, right? And finally, you should be aware of jobs. Just if you kind of want to just like go into it and you want this to be your career, government jobs from many different agencies, you're going to go to this website. It's usajobs.gov, right? And that includes National Park Service. So any National Park Service job that's listed is listed there, for instance. Now, these jobs tend not to be entry-level positions, so many of them do require that you already have experience. So I would recommend that you definitely either volunteer or do an internship with Student Conservation Association or AmeriCorps first to kind of get your foot in the door, right, before looking at usajobs.gov. All right, my friends, that's it for me today. Do you have any questions about anything that I have talked about thus far? Any questions for me?
So we'll just wait a couple minutes to see if there's any questions in the chat. Yeah.
This is a picture of me. I'm here kind of in the center or towards the end, and a bunch of other scientists after we're doing intertidal monitoring, right, our tide pools for marine species. And we can only do this during low tide, because otherwise it's completely covered with water, right? So there's only a certain amount of time a year, and just during those low tides, and we have a short window, we have a 4-hour window to get out there, get all of our data, and get back before the tide comes in, right? So here we are, we're on our way back and the tide is coming in. I think this is the day that I all the way up to my chest, because we weren't fast enough. All right, I see a question now. Go for it, Ella.
Yeah, we've got a question in the chat. Thank you for the presentation. Are there volunteer links for online internships? And we have a lot of people, you know, from all over the world in that presentation today. So not just locals to San Diego. So do you have any suggestions for people looking to get involved in a similar career path to you from abroad, not necessarily US citizen?
Right, that's an excellent point. So there's going to be conservation organizations, much like the National Park Service, in your country. So it's up to you, depending on what country you're in, right, is to kind of investigate that. So you can actually just Google conservation organizations in the name of your country. Many of them, some of them are government organizations, right? So there are national parks, for instance, in other countries in the world. The national parks are only specific to the United States, though fun fact, they started in the United States with Yellowstone in 1872. But I was in New Zealand a couple years ago, for instance, and they have many different national parks there, right? So they have a big conservation organization there that you could work with. There's also going to be a lot of nonprofits in your region too. So just Google like kind of what's near you, and some options will come up. And many of them will have options for volunteering and internships as well.
Okay, another question. How has the pandemic affected your work? I'm curious about this as well.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I received special dispensation to continue a lot of this. We call it field work, when you go out into the field to study things that live there, right? Or environmental science, when you're taking environmental data. So because it's outside, I was with 0 to only 2 other people. We were masked up the entire time when I was with people. That sort of thing. So and these are long-term data sets. So some of our data sets are over 30 years long. And this is actually something that's really nice about the National Park Service. Our national parks have been preserved land, so you can get that long-term data year after year and compare how things are changing year after year, right? And so it was essential that I continued that work, because if we didn't, there'd be an interruption in our data set, right? And we don't want that in science, right? We don't want that at all. So I continue to do it. Finished our bird surveys just recently. Our reptile and amphibian surveys go year round. So I'll be doing some more of that. We do it every month. So the dates for that are coming back up. And then come winter time, we'll be going back out into intertidal. But that just answers one question. The other thing is public engagement, right? So obviously I'm not going to be going out to school. Schools were no longer in session, right? Obviously I was not going out to like big auditoriums filled with people because of COVID. So I totally pivoted to virtual engagement. So using Zoom, right? Using platforms like Nepris, which connects classrooms to professionals. Using tools like Facebook Live and social media to really continue to engage the public and educate them and hopefully inspire them. There's nothing quite the same as being in it, right? Like being in that nature, but it's a pretty good booby prize, right? It's a pretty good second best thing. Hope that answered your question.
Awesome. Another question we have is, what were some species that required especially clever solutions to study them?
Especially clever solutions to study them. That's an interesting question, because it's every species is different, right? So I'm not necessarily sure if one is more clever than the other per se. Let me think about that for a second.
Yeah, take your time for sure.
Yeah, there's something. Yeah, that's a hard question. I'm trying to think if there's something very strange. Well, let me say this. There are species that are very rare, and that's difficult, right, to study them. If you never catch them and never see them, do you even know that they're still there, right? So one thing that we do for our really rare species, for instance, rare animals in the intertidal, like abalone, we do a timed search. So we'll have a bunch of biologists in one area, kind of a large area, and look under every crevice, down between boulders, really like sometimes we have to lay down and kind of like look in there and really see if we can find any in that time search, if that makes sense. You just do it for a specific period of time, because otherwise you could look, you're in the tide pool, so you could look forever. Yeah, that's a good one. I'm going to noodle that some more. I'm going to think about that some more to see if there's something else I could think of that had to be very clever. Great question.
Another question is, so This is from Serena. Working with the National Park Service, you find that visitors are generally the people who are most likely to support conservation. How do you reach people who might not be aware of, learn about the NPS and environmental conservatism? That's
a really, yeah, very good question. So that's a lot of my role, right? Is to really reach out to the community and say, hey, we have this thing here and you want to be exposed to it. You want to come out for a free field trip. Do you want me to come to your classroom and talk to you about it, right? So that's one of the things that I do. And then there's a lot of different engagement, like in social media and the like. But, you know, that's the question that everyone is asking themselves is like, how do we get people to care more, right? And so my answer is to do it like one person at a time. If you can make that connection with one person of like, wow, that's so cool, I didn't know that, or wow, it's really beautiful here, I'm shocked at how beautiful it is, and just giving them that connection one person at a time, you know, I think you hook them kind of for life. Like they start thinking differently, if that makes sense. I do a snake talk every week at the park where I bring out a live native snake to give people a positive experience with them. And at least one person every time I do it changes their mind about snakes, right? Like at first they're like, I hate snakes, they're the worst. And then they're listening and they're like, oh, wow, that's really interesting. That's pretty cool. I didn't know they could do that. And next thing you know, they're like, can I touch the snake? You know, you let them touch the snake. Like, oh, this is really soft. And I know with that person, I'm like, oh, I got you. You're not just going to kill every snake you see now, are you? You're going to think about why they're important to their environment. Maybe that'll give you pause, right?
Yeah, I've actually had that experience. I think in my 8th grade class, they brought in a snake for our like science discovery day, and I was pretty freaked out in the beginning, but you know, it was chill. Everything was fine.
Yeah, everything's fine. And I think that's it. A lot of people, you know, there are some people who actually have a phobia. It's called ophidiophobia, I believe, unreasonable fear of snakes, right? Just like arachnophobia is an unreasonable fear of spiders, right? So those people, that's a separate thing. But I think most people say they're afraid of snakes or hate snakes when it's really they just haven't had any experience. All they see is like snakes negatively portrayed in the media or chasing people in the media, you know, and it's like once you give them that experience of like, oh, this animal doesn't want to have anything to do with me and it's pretty chill, like, you know, it could change your mind.
For sure. So another question is, what are some problems in the park that you personally have solved?
Problems in the park that I have personally solved. So most of what I do is called inventory and monitoring. So most of what I do is actually data collection and analysis that I then report back to the National Park Service. And I'm not the one who says, now we're going to change our protocol, now we're going to do this differently. That gets sent up the chain, right? For us, land managers to look at and be like, okay, something is happening here, and we maybe have to change what we do. So by taking long-term data sets, right, like we do in our tide pools, we're discovering how things are changing in our tide pools. And one of the things that they implemented, we were finding that you know, humans have a big impact on their environment. So when people come down in the tide pools, we hypothesize that they are affecting a lot of the tide pool organisms that live there by like stepping on them, right? Ripping them off rocks, that sort of thing. Even though those are against the rules, people still do it. And so now we limit the amount of people that go into our tide pools. So on really busy days, on really nice low tides, we actually are out there with a people counter, and we'll close the tide pools if we need to, if we get too many people coming into the tide pools. And we limit the amount of permits we give big groups to go into the tide pools. So I think science is a collaborative effort. There's nothing that I personally have solved, but I have contributed to myself and the other scientists to kind of see these issues and then to make some changes to kind of protect these species. Hope that answered your question.
Got it. Another question is, what was your favorite experience while working for the NPS? And which national park would you want to visit in the future? And I have a question to kind of tack onto this one as well. What is your favorite national park that you visited? If you could.
Yeah, that is a tough one. Let me see. I'm going to put this so I can see your faces on gallery view a little bit more. It's bigger. Okay, cool. How many of you have your cameras off? Okay. Let me see a show of hands, like who's been to a national park before? Anyone been to a national park? And that includes Cabrillo, right? Our local one. All right, great. Thank you for turning your camera on. Awesome. Yeah, right. So that's a hard question because I don't know if you noticed, but our national parks are really beautiful places, especially in the West, right? We're talking like the Grand Canyon, Yellowstone, Yosemite, right? Even the austere places like Joshua Tree, it's like, it has its own beauty, right? So the answer is I'd like to go to all of them, all 420, and that is my life goal. When I retire, I intend to buy an RV and travel to all the national parks, and then I'll have to fly to the one in Puerto Rico, right? For instance, obviously can't drive it there, but I think if I had to choose a favorite, I think I have to go with Yellowstone, right? I mean, growing up there, that's like my home. That's really what got me super excited about nature and about conservation. And who doesn't love seeing bears and wolves and eagles and, I mean, moose and bison, and it's pretty epic there. I mean, geysers, like, I gotta go with Yellowstone, I think, oldest and best. If I have to choose another one, so I will be going the Southern Utah National Parks. So Zion, Bryce, Canyonlands, they are exquisitely beautiful. And I have never been, I've only seen pictures of Bryce, and I have heard nothing but amazing things. So I think the one I want to go to the most is probably Bryce at this point. Great question. Oh, what do I love? Favorite experience working for the NPS? Gosh, that's tough. I'm going to give you two answers for that. One is being able to be immersed in that nature, right? So like finding, you never know, it's like a treasure hunt. You never know what you're going to get when you're out there, right? So you're trying to catch these animals to study them. You don't know if you're going to see them or not. So one of the things that I absolutely love is our peregrine falcon pair. It's the fastest animal on earth, right? And I happened to be out there one morning, and these animals can dive at 240 miles an hour, right? Like they are amazing aerial acrobats, and they do so because they eat other birds and they have to catch them midair, right? So I'm just standing there looking at the beautiful view, and someone shouts, "Peregrine falcon," behind me, and I turn and I look, and here comes this peregrine falcon chasing a dove. Like, I mean, we're talking like jet fighter aerial acrobatics, like crazy. They're doing barrel rolls around each other. This peregrine falcon's trying to get just right by my head. I mean, I could feel the air whizzing. And he grabs the dove's tail feathers, explosion of feathers, dove escapes, still diving down, and finally, boom, gets them. And you see them like, you see him grab the dove and then fly off with it. And it was like Wild Kingdom. I was like, yeah, I was screaming. It was amazing. So being able to witness things like that is amazing to do that for the National Park Service. And the other great thing about my job is seeing that connection that people make. So one of my favorite projects is the STEM summer camp for girls that I lead, Ecologic. A lot of these girls aren't out in nature, like have never been to a national park. This is a rare experience for them. And just seeing them like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. Wait, what? This marine snail changes sex halfway through its life? It starts out as a boy and turns into a girl? What? Like, just, they're mind blown, right? And knowing, I'm like, ooh, I think I've got another environmental steward on my hand now after this experience, right? So those are the two things, my favorite.
Yeah, I didn't know an aquatic snail, changes sex. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's amazing, right?
Yeah, a question I have for you is, so working for the NPS, does the NPS influence any of the environmental policies that we see kind of being brought to light in Washington, like Green New Deal, things like that?
That's a great question. So I would say less that NPS influences environmental policy and more the other way around, where environmental policy definitely influences how the National Park Service does its business, right? Fulfills the mission. That's not to say that there aren't people higher up in the National Park Service who don't push for things, right? Who don't speak with people. We're in the Department of the Interior, right? So you don't speak to the Department of the Interior and say, hey, we think we should do this, right? Like, our data is showing that this would be a better way to manage land. So it's a little bit of back and forth, right? Does a little bit of influencing, and then is definitely influenced by environmental laws. So one of the big laws that we have to adhere to is called NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act, which anytime anyone, the government, right, wants to do anything in preserved land, building a road, right, putting a new visitor center in, any of these things, there has to be a long-term study on the environmental impacts in that area, a really robust study, and that's the law that NEPA does. So that's one of the best policies that we can follow, right, to really make sure that we know the impact that we're having on our environment.
Awesome. Okay, and I have another question for you as well.
Sure.
Do you think that if you hadn't grown up in Yellowstone or near Yellowstone, do you think you'd be where you are now? Do you think that you have the career that you have now?
That's a great question. The answer is, I don't know, right? And that's part of the reason that I really want to give people that experience. Because again, if they aren't exposed to something, if they don't even know it exists, how can they care about it, right? If they don't know about our national parks, how do they want to protect them or be, work to continue our national parks, right? We need people, we need young people to say, yeah, this is important preserved land and we need to continue to preserve it forever, right? For myself, my kids, etc. So again, one person at a time, just trying to give them that experience. I'd like to think, I've always loved animals, right? And I would like to think that I would be doing something like this, but maybe it would have been something more like a veterinarian or something like that, right? Maybe not necessarily a conservation biologist. Great question.
So does anyone else have any questions? If so, feel free to drop them in the chat. Yeah.
Any last minute questions, guys? I do hope for those of you who are in San Diego that you come out and visit me at the park. You can always, I'm mostly working from home right now because of COVID, but as things kind of open back up, right, I'll be back in the office. You can always ask for me by name when you come to the visitor center. And if I'm available, I can come out, give you a little tour.
That would be wonderful. Yeah. I have great memories at Cabrillo, so it's,
oh, good.
Know someone who works there now. Hopefully when this is all over, maybe the Aquascope team can do a field trip now.
You would be most welcome. I'd love to host you.
Other than that, thank you so much, Samantha. That was such a wonderful presentation. And it's great to, speak to people who have such a passion for the environment. And I'm so grateful that people like you exist and are actively out there fighting and educating. So on that note, this is kind of the end of our 3-week-long summer seminars. I would love to have a group picture with everyone. So if it is possible, if you feel comfortable doing so, please show us your camera so that we can, take a nice group photo. And Samantha, could I ask you to unshare your screen so that I can get the grid view?
Of course. Yeah, of course. There you go. Do you want me to take off and just get a group photo with Project Aquascope? I would not be offended.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, awesome. Bye, guys. Thank you again.
Okay, thanks you guys. Basically just some logistics for the end. Thank you, again, all of you sticking throughout the entire program. We'll be sending out an email to all of you with all the consolidated resources from all 6 speakers on how, the opportunities they gave. I don't know if you guys remember from week 1, but there's internship opportunities, there's all this stuff. So we'll be sending out an email and also making sure to get all those resources your way and other opportunities for you all to stay engaged with us. Yeah, thank you, you guys.